Appamada and its programs are supported by your generosity, and your generosity and support makes such a difference. You can find a link for contributions on the website at appamada.org. Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. You see behind me my little Zendo here in Wilmette. And I'm so pleased that you're able to join me for this exploration. For those who don't know me, I'm Peg Syverson. I'm the senior teacher at Appamada, and I'm delighted to be with you. This is a subject that is long fascinated me, and that I've wanted to share a next sort of exploration with you of it. It was the most recently was stimulated by my little granddaughter, who's turning 3 this week. So I had the delicious duty of watching her while my son and my daughter-in-law had to go out. And before he left, my son said to me, "Well, I think you should know she's in the why phase, so she's asking why about everything." And here's what I do when she says why. I say, "Well, why do you think?" And I thought that seemed like a really good plan. So they had no sooner left, and I explained to her they were going off to help Susan's uncle with his computer. And she said to me, "Why?" And I said, "Well, why do you think?" And she said, "Talk about it." So this put the ball squarely back in my court, and I thought, well, okay, let's talk about it. So today we're going to begin this series of classes on the mystery of cause and effect in the Buddhist teaching. So the Buddha described this teaching as subtle, profound, and difficult to comprehend. We will draw on traditional and contemporary texts and commentaries to investigate how our concepts of cause and effect permeate every aspect of our lives, both as individuals and collectively, in families, workplaces, organizations, institutions, and societies. So as Joanna Macy writes, in our personal lives, assumptions about cause and effect provide the very ground for our sense of coherence. That is, the ways we find the world intelligible and the ways we posit our relationship to it, and I might say to each other. Do we see events as random, discontinuous, and beyond our control? Or do we see effective relationships that give leverage to our actions? These are essentially questions of causality, and they shape our attitudes and behaviors. They are basic to our notions of responsibility and our attributions of blame and guilt. They color our encounters with conflict, guide our efforts to find solutions. Causal assumptions even affect the relative reality we ascribe to ourselves in our world. So Macy links developments in scientific thinking, particularly systems theory, in this book, Mutual Causality in Buddhism and General Systems Theory, which I highly recommend. She links those developments in scientific thinking to a paradigm shift in how we view causality through concepts such as synergy, feedback, causal loops, symbiosis. These concepts suggest that events affect each other in a back and forth manner, creating circuits and networks of contingency where causes and effects interact reciprocally. She notes, what this new paradigm challenges is not the notion of causality itself, that events modify each other in objective and intelligible ways, but rather the manner in which causality has been perceived. It challenges the idea that causal action flows in one direction only, from cause to effect, from producer to produced, like a series of billiard balls or falling dominoes. So what were the Buddha's original teachings on causality? He taught this concept over his entire teaching career, over and over and over again, far more than he taught either the Four Noble Truths or the precepts or anything else. I'm going to start with the questions that he was asked by Kashyapa, who was a wandering ascetic, not even one of the Buddha's disciples. But the Buddha would sit down in the afternoon after his midday meal and sort of open the floor for questions from anyone. So Kashyapa asked him this. He says, "We do not wish to ask Master Gautama much." "Then ask what you want, Kashyapa." "How is it, Master Gautama? Is suffering created by oneself?" "Not so, Kashyapa," the Blessed One said. "Then, Master Gautama, is suffering created by another?" "Not so, Kashyapa," the Blessed One said. "Well, how is it then, Master Gautama? Is suffering created both by oneself and by another?" "Not so, Kashyapa," the Blessed One said. "Then, Master Gautama, has suffering arisen fortuitously, being created neither by oneself nor by another?" "Not so, Kashyapa." "How is it then, Master Gautama? Is there no suffering?" "It is not that there is no suffering, Kashyapa. There is suffering." "Then is it that Master Gautama does not know and see suffering?" "It is not that I do not know and see suffering, Kashyapa. I know suffering. I see suffering." Whether you are asked, "How is it, Master Gautama, is suffering created by oneself? Or is it created by another? Or is it created by both? Or is it created by neither?" In each case, you say, "Not so, Kashyapa." When you are asked, "How is it then, Master Gautama, is there no suffering?" you say, "It is not that there is no suffering, Kashyapa. There is suffering." When asked, "Then is it that Master Gautama does not know and see suffering?" you say, "It is not that I do not know and see suffering, Kashyapa. I know suffering, I see suffering." Venerable Sir, let the Blessed One explain suffering to me. Let the Blessed One teach me about suffering. So here's where the Buddha starts to make a very clear discernment for Kashyapa and for us. "Kashyapa, if one thinks the one who acts is the same as one who experiences the result, then one asserts, with reference to one existing from the beginning, suffering is created by oneself. When one asserts thus, this amounts to eternalism. But Kashyapa, if one thinks the one who acts is one, the one who experiences the result is another, then one asserts, with reference to one stricken by feeling, suffering is created by another. When one asserts thus, this amounts to annihilationism. Without veering towards either of these extremes, the Tathagata teaches the Dhamma by the middle." And here's what he teaches. "From ignorance, as a requisite condition, come fabrications." This is from the Paticca Samuppada Vibhaga Sutta, which is in the Nikayas. So, from ignorance, as a requisite condition, come fabrications. From fabrications, as a requisite condition, comes consciousness. From consciousness, as a requisite condition, comes name and form. From name and form, as a requisite condition, comes the six sense media. From six sense media, as a requisite condition, comes contact. From contact, as a requisite condition, comes feeling. From feeling, as a requisite condition, comes craving. From craving, as a requisite condition, comes clinging, sustenance. From clinging, sustenance, as a requisite condition, comes becoming. From becoming, as a requisite condition, comes birth. From birth, as a requisite condition, then, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair come into play. Such is the origination of this entire mass of stress and suffering. So, in this teaching, you might be tempted to think of this as a sequence, but it's not truly a sequence. It's more like a network of mutually reinforcing influences. Cause and effect is the kind of ground of relating, I would say. So when the Buddha wanted to define these things, he gave these definitions. Now, what is aging and death? Whatever aging, decrepitude, brokenness, graying, wrinkling, decline of life force, weakening of the faculties of the various beings in this or that group of beings, this is called aging. Whatever deceasing, passing away, breaking up, disappearance, dying, death, completion of time, breakup of the aggregates, casting off of the body, interruption in the faculty of the various beings in this or that group of beings, this is called death. So he's going to go through and he's explaining each of these terms and which birth, whatever taking birth, descent, coming to be, coming forth, appearance of aggregates, and acquisition of sense media of the various beings in this or that group of beings, that is called birth. So this is the Buddha's earliest and most complete teachings on paticca samuppada, on dependent arising. But this is such a subtle and challenging teaching, I think, for us to actually internalize or get experientially, because we continue to try and figure out what's the cause of something, what's the effect of something. So the term that he used, paticca samuppada, explains that Macy explains, very difficult to translate into English. But upada means arising, and samuppada means arising together. Paticca is used to denote grounded on or on account of. So literally the compound term paticca samuppada would mean the being on account of arising together. So I think this is very challenging for us, and as he said, as the Buddha said, subtle, complex, profound, and difficult to comprehend. I want to talk a little bit about that in maybe a bit more contemporary terms. So we can think about it in terms of what does that have to do with us in our everyday lives and our practical applications. Because it's not just a theory, it's an observation about the way things are. So as you noticed from Kashyapa's questions, there were 4 views of causation. They were common in the Buddha's time already in philosophy and in spiritual training, and they were common in the West from Western philosophers. So we share that. The first one is that of internal causation. Something's inherently that way. It has that potential that gets realized. The second is external causation. Something moves because it's pushed. Something causes by external means a change in something. Then the third view or model is both. So it's internal and external forces working together. And the fourth one is neither, which means causation is entirely accidental. So there's no real cause of anything. Everything happens randomly. Those were the 4 views that were common in the Buddha's time. So we can think in our contemporary time of some examples. For example, in psychology, when we think about anger or depression or addiction, there are 4 main explanations. One is internal, so that means it's genetic, it's your biochemistry, it's your nervous system that's creating these psychological issues. The second model, external causation, is it's your environment, it's parental neglect, it's abuse, it's society that have driven you into these states of mind. The third is the both model. And there, I think you find things like attachment issues, trauma, family systems as both internal and external causation. And then the fourth, which most psychologists wouldn't endorse, but the general public often does, some kids are more resilient and some kids are not. So it's a sort of an accident, happy accident, one way or the other. Um, in daily living, for example, you might be aware that you're going to be late. So the internal cause and effect model is, I should have left a half an hour ago. I should have planned for this. What's wrong with me? Why am I so late getting out of the house? What have I done? Now I've made myself late. That's the internal causation. External causation, every damn light is red. This traffic is making me late. Then the third is, I was late getting out of the house and now I'm behind a bus. So that's the both, right? And the fourth, oh geez, somehow I'm gonna be late. So it's just sort of some accident has happened and now I'm going to be late. So we use all four of these views, most of us, but we do have our favorites, we do have our tendencies. And often our naive assumption tries to work backward from an unwanted effect to find the cause, and eliminating the cause will eliminate the effect. So we think of this in a very linear way. And this is the very reason why so many of our issues, social issues and relational issues, seem to be so intractable, because we're looking for the single cause that we can eliminate, or we're looking for the single linear chain of cause and effect that we can create. So there are some corollary factors that are involved in this that impact our way of being in the world. So assigning causes evokes emotions. So some of those emotions might be, or some reactivity, some kind of reactivity. So maybe explanation leads to some kind of satisfaction. Oh, that's why that happened, right? Yeah, that's what caused this. Or some relief. Of course, it's obvious. I should have left the house 10 minutes earlier. Or blame. Some blame yourself or blame others. Might lead to sorrow. Why did this have to happen? Or to some disappointment or anger at yourself or at others or at the world. It might lead to compassion. It might lead to regret. There are a whole host of emotions we can investigate that are triggered or evoked by this assigning causes to effects. Assigning causes also serves our ongoing project, which is to explain, predict, and control. This is hardwired into us. And we, from the very beginning, our species has looked for patterns in the world and then tried to predict what's going to happen so that we could control it. As far as we know, this is not so common in other species. So also assigning causes affirms the self and perpetuates the illusion of substantial being or identity. So it's very helpful in our self project. Linear causality gives a reassuring sense of order and balance that just, unfortunately, happens to be wrong. But it is something we cling to, and you can often find yourself sort of manipulating things to make it seem like that's actually the way things happen, in a nice linear form. Oftentimes when we tell our story to somebody, we put it in a form with very neat linear causality. So then I decided to go back to graduate school. So this leads to painful questions, oftentimes, like, did my negative thoughts cause my cancer? Right? Should we have been stricter as parents? Did I make the wrong decision in taking this job? Should we force him to continue his piano lessons? And what can I do to make my boss respect me? So there's all kinds of things that we have organized our life around in terms of our causal models. If I want to do well at my job, should I learn my craft Should I remove some of the obstacles to my progressing or advancing in my career? Should I try to do both at the same time? Should I just hope for the best? So just be a good person and hope for the best. So we work backward, as the Buddha did after he discovered this dependent origination. He worked it backwards. And so we work from effects, trying to discover the cause or causes, and invariably we look for them in one of the four categories: internal, external, both, or neither. So our models of causation and the associated emotions shape our thoughts and our words and our actions. You maybe have noticed this. From that emotion state, we construct a sort of logical paradigm of what we should say, what we should do, how we should act in a situation. And because cause and effect are relational influences, we often think unilaterally in our own relationships. So we think, in order for this relationship to get better, I have to fix myself, or the other person has to fix themselves, or maybe I can fix them. We look internally, we look externally, and we say, we're gonna have to work together, we're gonna have to have couples therapy. Or we say, well, whatever happens, happens, who can say? It's an accident. So those models create very different ways of relating, right? Wouldn't you imagine? So we also have a conscious and unconscious dependence on causal models. So it's hard for us to have a window into our unconscious models of causation, but they show up when we feel suddenly some disappointment, or we have some expectation. That those are typically based on our causal models and maybe point to some that are unconscious to us or non-obvious. So it's the nature of this relational influence that I think is what the Buddha is actually creating a revolution in, because he's talking about process instead of power, instead of what has power over another, talking about that process of arising together. So causality is a relational influence, and the real question is, what kind of a relationship is it? And what's its directionality? Because in Buddhist thinking, that directionality, that's mutual, right? Causes and effects are mutually creating each other. And in the conventional Western and even the Indian models of causality, there's a linear cause, then effect. And it's based on what I would think of as really a more fractional time scale, because it's looking only at a moment in which there's one way influence, and not in the larger picture of how these influences are playing out. Almost nothing is the result of a single influence. So these causal models create expectations and assumptions about responsibility and power and access to information and resources. We think, I think you can see this in sort of the wide range of views in society about things such as racial injustice, or the way institutions wield power. So they're based on causal assumptions that if we do X, Y will happen. If we lock up the criminals, then we won't have any crime. That's a good example. So causal models are also collectively held by tribes, by organizations, by institutions, societies. And causal models that are shared create social cohesion, so as well as principles for belonging or exclusion. So we make a certain assumptions about causes and effects that have an impact on even such things as whether someone has a sense of belonging, or whether we believe someone belongs or doesn't belong. So So we can easily see then that causal models, at least conventionally, the simplistic and overly simplified causal models that we conventionally hold, create a tremendous amount of suffering. And that suffering is created by blaming the victim. Somehow you caused this suffering you're experiencing. Punishing the perpetrators, social division, denial of issues. This is the accidentalism thing. Well, yeah, maybe climate change is happening, but nothing's causing it. It's just the ups and downs of climate. And cultural misunderstandings are commonly caused by different causal models. What causes child abuse? What causes alcoholism? So there are a lot of cultural misunderstandings about cause and effect, and it causes relational ruptures between people in the workplace, at home, and families. It causes conflict, internal conflict inside yourself, relational conflict, societal conflict, and it results in things like divorce or war or political unrest, simply because there are different causal models. It's probably obvious to you that in the West, we have a certain view of certain causal models of illness, for example. So we think illness is caused by viruses, bacteria. We have medical models and scientific models. What causes illness? And in other cultures, it's not the same causal model. So in one culture in Africa, there's a model that all illness is caused by social rupture of some kind. So whenever someone is sick, they bring the entire village to that person's hut. They have a ritual of cleansing and remorse and weaving back together again the fabric of that village, the social fabric, in which the person is woven back into it. Well, they have about the same success rate as Western doctors. So it's an entirely different model of cause and effect, right? What causes this dis-ease? So I think this is such an important teaching, and it's so difficult to begin to really tease it apart. It's going to take us over the next 5 classes to work with it and to try and give ourselves enough space to see what are the implications really of this kind of shift in our thinking about cause and effect. You may already have made that shift. It's a very groundless feeling to not just throw up your hands and say, well, could be anything, like I really don't, I won't assign any causes then to anything. And that also is a mistake, because we do have influence, and influence is one of the things that we want to understand, how we have an influence. So even in our spiritual practice, we practice for some reason, right? We want to get calmer, we want to be less stressed, we want to be better parents, we're curious, but we have a sort of causal model that launches us into practice. And thank heavens that we do, because we have some feeling that if we do something will be different. As we practice longer, we begin to realize, wow, it's way more complicated than that. Sometimes I don't feel like sitting and I sit anyway, and these are the things I'm noticing, but they're not exactly the thing I thought I was starting out to do. So for example, I wanted to be a better mom, and I discovered, well, I can't really, there's no way to say better or worse. I just feel like, I don't know, I seem to have a little more patience maybe, I don't, but I can't tell somebody, well, you should sit so you have more patience as a parent. So this is where you start to see that these effects and causes are interrelated. And as I have a little bit more patience, I'm sitting a little bit more easily. As I'm sitting a little bit more easily, I'm feeling a little more grounded. As I'm feeling a little more grounded, I don't pop off at my child so much. So there's a kind of, and as I do that, I feel better about myself. It makes me be able to sit a little bit more easily. So there's this, as you can see, there's this compounding effect in our practice. So on the spiritual path, the first thing you begin to suspect is that it's not a linear road. and also that it's not a super highway that everybody knows. It's really a unique and distinctive experiential immersion in life as it is, and our responsiveness to it. So what you can't even say, well, because I was sitting, X happened. Who knows? I mean, I, I told Joko at one point, well, I've been sitting for 10 years now. And she said, what do you think is different? And I said, how would I know? How would I know what would have happened if I hadn't been sitting? I have no way to know that. So I have a little activity. And I think this might be helpful in beginning your own reflection about this. So it's a set of 3 questions. And if you have something to write with and well, some paper and pencil, maybe you can make some notes about this. And then I'm going to see if we can have some small group discussions about what you discover. So what I would like you to do, the first thing is, and you don't have to write an essay about this, just make some notes for yourself. Within the past 24 hours, choose an event, a situation, or an experience. And just make a little note about what that is. And so I'm going to ask a series of simple questions. So just the simplest response that comes to your head immediately. It's just going to be a phrase or maybe a sentence at the most. It happened because, and that was because, and that was because, and that was because. Okay, question number 2. That was question 1. And this might be the same event or experience, might be a different one. You said or did something in order to. So you can think about it, might be some other, but in the last 24 hours, you said or did something in order to, so that, that's question number 2. Question number 3, last question. What do you think is your default causal model? Internal, external, both, neither? Sometimes it helps to think about when there's some kind of stress or upset. What do you immediately think? So Kim, you're hosting, and I think it'd be great to have breakout rooms. If we can have groups of 4, not including me, that we would have 32 people. So, and we could do breakout rooms for, let's say, 20 minutes and give people an opportunity to talk about what they have learned or observed or discovered about this relationship and these expectations that we have. Or anything related to what you were writing about. Welcome back, everybody. I hope that was productive, generative. I'd love to hear some of what you discovered in your group. If you want to raise your hand, we can hear a little bit of what your experience was with the exercise or with your your partners in your small group. So the down in the bottom right-hand corner where it says reactions, you can use that button to raise your hand. Joel, and then Gail.
Thank you. Well, I was in a wonderful group with Darcy and Laura and Lisa, and time was very short. We had some important things to talk about, but couldn't get to everybody. So, although it seemed like a long time when we first started, but what came through for me, or what seems most generative to me, is the way that we shared things where we were able to realize or recognize the lenses that we're looking through, the ways that we frame issues that reinforce the issues, that we construct, and then we construct solutions that also reinforce the issue. And I don't know, there were some wonderful things that were shared, and I was really grateful for the heartfelt way that people were responding as well to what was shared.
Gail?
Our group got off to kind of a little, we tried to figure out how we were going to manage all this. That seems to be a theme. And we had some glitches where somebody, wasn't able to speak and had to come back in because of the computer issues and so on. And then Ellen was there, but she had missed the whole question and answer thing. But I think what I got out of the entire group, and it was just really wonderful to do this exercise, is to notice how I start out with external reasons for why something happens, and then as I go deeper, it immediately starts to do a UE into the internal. And it starts out that something happened because of Mother's Day, and then it ends up because I was a teenage mom, and and I kind of listening to some of the others, I was noticing sort of the same pattern, and we were all women in our group as well. And I don't know if that has anything to do with it. I have no idea, but it really helped when you were talking about that these causal models very often cause suffering in us, feelings of insecurity or, and they even start out as something that you wouldn't even think, like going to get glasses. That was my second thing. All of a sudden degenerated toward the very end into, I don't want to be a burden on people. I have to, you know what I mean? So I thought it was a very interesting exercise, and thank you, Peg. This promises to be a very interesting class.
Yeah.
And thank you all for being in it. I'm so happy to see so many people.
Isn't it wonderful?
Yeah.
Yeah. So many of our dear friends together. So I think Claudine, you had your hand up. You're muted still.
Thank you. I am not going to speak about what you asked, sorry. My daughter is going straight away to the hospital. She hasn't been very well for 5 days, and I might not be able to stay with the group until the end, but please hold us in your hearts, because I hope everything is going okay. Thank you. And if she's away before the end, then I will come back. Okay,
We will send metta from everyone.
thank you. Thank you very much.
Any other reflections you'd like to share?
So, like, is it all right if I say something?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I really noticed the swaying back and forth where the causal effect was, situation happened and then it was all my fault. Everything was my fault, and it was, and then I'd just find myself sinking a bit. And then I think with the sinking, it was almost like, oh, well, maybe it was something, looking at them then to try and get away from that sinking feeling. And then maybe they shouldn't have talked to me like that. Maybe they shouldn't have been like that, and then back to myself. Maybe I'm just too sensitive. maybe, I'm just hearing everything wrong. Maybe, I just need to sort of, look at things a bit clearer, and then I go to the accidental, kind of like, oh, they didn't mean it. It was an accident. We just bumped into each other, like people do in life. And these things just happen. And then right back again to, oh, no, it's me. I need to look at my inner processes. I need to look at what's going on and, and kind of really looking at why I get triggered and, the younger parts of me getting triggered and how they kind of can make things a bit more than what they are, if you like. And then I go back to, but yeah, there was reasons though, because those things shouldn't have been said like that, and it could have been said differently, and then it all kind of starts to settle once I've flapped it all out and gone back and forth, and then it all settles. And then I notice a weight, like Flint said the other week or this week, about the weight of love, because I care about these people and I love these people, and all that hurt and rejection and sense is the weight of love underneath it all, that hurt that the body's trying to kind of make sense of and get away from and make less, rather than turning towards it and thinking, oh yes, I need to sit with that, just sit with it and just be with it, rather than doing this dance.
You have a causal pinball game going.
Explains a lot.
Just get that ball in play and that's why sitting with it is so helpful for you, because it settles down that bouncing around among causal models, any one of which could be plausible. That's wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing. I think a lot of us do that, bounce among those different models. Well, if it's not this, it must be this, Yeah, that's wonderful. And Kim, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, so last night I was ready for bed and I then noticed some dishes weren't put away, and then I was putting a glass in the dishwasher and hit it against the counter and broke it, and then had to get out the vacuum cleaner, on and on and on. And I remember in a depth and practice once, we had an Indian Buddhist who came and joined us. You were there, and he kept saying that birth was the cause of death. And that really, I'll always remember that. And so I got down way before that. It was my parents being born that caused the glass to be broken. And then I got down to, the earth being created, and then I got down to the Big Bang, and I was surprised with the other people in the group that they didn't get back to the Big Bang, because I thought it was so obvious to me that was the problem.
That was the start of it all, right?
And I did notice that I blamed Linda for not putting the dishes away, and then I blamed me being tired, and then as I thought more about why was I tired, then I blamed my life. But I'm curious about, we have these different parts that we keep talking about. And was that really me? Like, was I the one who was tired, or was that my body? And trying to parse that would be another issue. Yeah. Who was tired?
Yeah. Exactly.
And is it even blaming me if I'm blaming my body, kind of thing? Like, what does that mean to blame me? You
Yeah.
know, how far into this thing is me, or where is me? So
Right. And then the question arises, is blame necessary?
that's a good one.
It's you know, it's you're not filing an insurance claim, right?
And it has to do with the responsibility too, doesn't it?
Responsibility is different from blame.
But the blame party is responsible in a sense, if you go with that.
You've assigned that. You've assigned that responsibility, and that means that you have a causal model at play, right? That's why this person is responsible. And so there are a lot of issues of responsibility and power that are part of our understanding of cause and effect relationships. So is the parent responsible for the child, or is the child responsible to the parent? There's mutual responsibility, right? And in effect, they construct each other. You can't actually be a parent without a child. That doesn't exist. So, so it's very interesting. I really think it's in families that you start to really see the mutual causality. We're the cause of each other, and that we create the causes and conditions through our causal models for distress and suffering with each other, for upset or for harmony and wisdom. So that's the idea that those things can be intentional in some way, that we can set an intention for that, is something we don't often look at. We think the causal model we have is a given. It's just given by the universe. And so I think this is why I think it's going to be fun to really look at these models, and also to look at what's the potential in what the Buddha's teaching. What is the potential for liberating us from being trapped in a model that creates suffering for ourselves and for others by our assumptions of cause and effect? Yeah, and I think he was really adamant about this. He just taught it over and over and over and over again, and he equated this with the Dhamma. This is what he discovered. This is, as Joanna Macy says, this is what happened during his enlightenment that can be conveyed conceptually, that we actually can study and understand. So, and this idea that is that we're talking about requisite conditions. We're not talking about causes that are linear causes. So these conditions existing bring into being this other thing. If they didn't exist, that wouldn't come into being. But you can't say that birth causes death. You know, you just can't say that. All you can say is that birth is a condition for death, that all beings that die have been born, right? So it's a requisite condition, but it's not a cause of death. Cause of death is poisoning, or cause of death is auto accident, or cause of death, you know, like the subtlety of this teaching is really, really surprising, because you keep bumping into our attempts to recreate a causal model that's familiar, a linear causal model, because it makes things simpler. It's what happens when people ask you, why do you meditate? I mean, you should be able to give a simple causal explanation. I meditate to lower my blood pressure. I meditate to be less angry, you know, but it doesn't work like that. So you'd have to kind of do violence to the phenomenon and the experience to create that kind of a construct.
But even if I say the glass broke because I hit it on the counter, other days I've hit it on the counter and it didn't break.
That's right. That's right. And why is it? Why
so
is
that a truth? Why is what?
Why is there a glass? I mean, part of the cause of breaking the glass is that there has to be a glass, right? Yeah. So, so this is why, I can hardly wait until my little granddaughter's old enough that I can tell her Flint's answer to the why questions, which is because of everything else in the universe. And, Thich Nhat Hanh teaches about this all the time, how in a piece of paper, there's sunlight that, that helped the tree grow, that, it's soil nutrients, water, there's transport, there's milling, so all of a sudden you start to see that many of our taken for granted assumptions just, are very, very naive. Okay, Chet, you had a question. You're muted though. Yeah.
Yes, my question is, this was fascinating because it's very difficult for me. I spent so much time creating these causation models in my head that I'm now, and I see the suffering that I'm causing myself and other people. And just getting to the superficial layer of realizing how deep that goes within me personally. Is the goal for me to understand, see those causal models that I'm operating in first, just to see them, and then once I see them, will I be able to drop away from them a little bit better? I mean, was Buddha's goal to see them, witness them as they are, but not be captured by them, but still be present to them in the sense, or should I let that take care of itself in the sense, just notice what I'm doing?
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it in that way. This is a liberation project. So anything that constrains your thinking, by definition, you're not free. So this teaching of the Buddha, when we begin to see, oh, there are causes and conditions that bring this into being, chances are really good I haven't seen all of them, right? I fastened on one or two that I think are the ones, but chances are really good I haven't seen the whole picture. And when I see the whole picture, I'm free of a constraining model that this causes this, or that this is an effect of this cause, right? When I'm free of that, I have a much larger view, this really horizonless view, which means that when I speak or think or act, I'm sort of effortlessly fostering the causes and conditions of more freedom and more compassion and more wisdom.
Wow.
Right? I'm not the cause of that any more than I could be the cause of appamata, right? I can't be the cause of appamata. I can create and foster my piece of the causes and conditions that help enable appamata to thrive, right? But without everybody else having a similar kind of aspiration or intention, not going to happen.
It's just so subtle because I'm using so much effort because I want to understand things better. So I don't want to drop away from the seeking of understanding better wisdom.
No, you absolutely should not. I mean, a big part of this path is investigation, and we're just investigating this model or this.
I want to investigate, but I don't want to get caught in the paradigm of the causation. I want to know the risk associated with my explorations into this cause, mutual arising versus causation.
There's a huge risk. And the risk is almost entirely to the ego.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
The ego that either thinks I'm to blame or other people are to blame and I'm a victim, or, it's a combination of factors, me and the other people, or, I mean, it's a way of constructing an ego self that has some substance, right? Which in your case might be the one who knows.
Yeah, that's right.
The one who finally actually knows.
Can you imagine the suffering I'm inflicting on everybody, including myself, everybody around me right now? So thank you.
Yeah. And this is one of the, I think, daunting things about practice is when you encounter that and you realize you're still caught, and we're going to continue to be caught until we're free. And that's binary. That's not gradual. There's no gradual path to liberation. You're either caught or you're free. It's quite binary. You're either awake or you're not. So this is our challenge from our sort of somnolent state where we're believing all our models and we have all these self-constructs and everything, to begin to see more clearly. It's quite painful in the beginning because you see, oh, everywhere I look, I'm creating wreckage, you know, and I'm caught in it. But that realization is the beginning of fostering new causes and conditions for wisdom and compassion, and that's what this path is. That's why we consider ourselves really fortunate to have found this path, where we can stop, as Flint says, making things worse. Yeah. But it's very daunting, I think, because we see more and more clearly, and what we see is what we're imprisoned in. So in some ways, we've been numbing ourselves to that reality, which has made us feel comfortable, but which is not freedom. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah. Good. Okay. So Kim, do you still have your hand up? Oh. Okay. I see we're at the end of our time. It's really a pleasure for me to have the opportunity to explore these ideas with you. And always when I'm teaching something like this, it helps me experience it more deeply, get a little bit more clarity myself about it. So it's a shared enterprise. I'm not bestowing anything on you. I'm just sharing my reflections and what I'm discovering in my own studies, because I think it might be useful for you. And you can just, over the course of the next week, just keep asking these because questions. So there's a 5 sigma process where you ask why, right? Why? I don't like that process very much, because of course the answer to any why question is because of everything else in the universe. But I think we can start to appreciate the models that we're holding by asking this set of questions. This happened because, and that was because, and that was because, or I'm doing this so that, and you start to see a little more clearly how we're holding our own particular models. So thank you so much for being with me today, and I will see you next week. Continue your investigations. Pretend you're a 3-year-old.
Thank you, Peg.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.